but I do what I'm told by my editor. And so I thought I'd bring some of my favorite slides. This one was always the one that nailed the kid in the bottom. Now this one was a favorite from my childhood. This was always a problem in our neighborhood. But the most fun slide of all was... Now, in putting together this really cheap gag, it made me think of where sources of ideas come from. And in particular, this one came from Bill Bryson, who is a very famous author who probably stole it from someone else. And it gave me an excuse to think about where some of these things came from. This is actually a very poor drawing. It's one of my first. It was done for my 11th grade class, art class in high school, and handed in to Mrs. Lewis, at which she glanced down. She says, "I don't even need to take it to give you a grade. It's an F. It's poorly designed, it's poorly executed, it doesn't really mean anything. Plus, if you notice, the knee is bending the wrong way, the foot. It's really horrible." So I took it back home and I showed it to my dad, and he said one word to me, and I handed it in again the following week with this word underneath it. I'd love to end the story with the fact that I got an A, which would be absolutely wrong. I still got an F, but what she added, she said, "Berkeley, you get an F, but you're going to be very wealthy one day." It was the first clue that I had, combining a picture and the right word, and take two mediocre pieces and put them together into a whole that is larger than the sum of the parts. That was really the first clue I had that that's probably where my career was going to go. And sure enough, to the Academia Wall, which was my college comic strip at the University of Texas in Denny, Texas, in 1978, most of which are impossible to reproduce or even show, given the fact that there are children in the audience, including my own. This, believe it or not, is just about the most tame version I could find, which is why you'll never see a collection, although we did squeeze a few in to the new complete Bloom County collection, but it was not easy finding three that would work. As thinking about how I got to the comic strips, it's worth to note that some of you might have already read, in fact it was mentioned in the paper today in the LA Times, that I have no history in comics. I'd never read comics as a child. Comic books was not a fixture of my imagination, and cartoons weren't. They did not come naturally to me. And when I thought back, so how did I get steered into the comic strip? It was besides the fact that I was literally fired from all the other positions in the University of Texas College newspaper for making stuff up, which they don't appreciate, to my shock, in journalism school, even though I got a Bachelor of Journalism degree. I was fired as photographer for pre-digital manipulation of photographs, news photography. I was fired on the editorial side for wholesale manufacture of news stories. It didn't go well. So I found the safest place to be in a newspaper and still make stuff up. But I didn't think of the comic strip first. I thought of editorial cartoons, which was an obvious thing to do. This was my first and only editorial cartoon. If you remember the very first Star Trek movie, this is the ad, or at least it came from the ad. And Austin, Texas had just gotten a busing order. And my response to the Austin American-Statesman, which gave me my first opportunity to do a professional cartoon. This was my first strip I handed in. Now the editor, for some reason, didn't see it. He didn't parse it that evening and didn't see it till the next day when he was being burned in effigy outside the office of the Austin American-Statesman because of this cartoon. It was not seen as being very funny to a population that was on edge about their new busing order. And I was literally, and I mean literally, pushed out the door and booted in the butt as I headed out the door because I was making the mistake of arguing that it was a perfectly fine cartoon, which the editor didn't want to hear. So I went back to stripping, so to speak, for that reason. I would have been an editorial cartoonist probably if this had happened any other way. And we're talking about sources, and sources of ideas, and sources of great moves, or interesting moves in a career. So, Bloom County. I was hired to do it right out of school, never got a job in my life, and came up with a penguin one day. Sure, but for no other reason than I needed an animal, and I was desperate for an animal in the strip. I was desperate for a focus in the strip a year into it, having no idea what I was doing, and not a faintest clue as to how you not only do a comic strip, but specifically one without a college readership to tell me what basically to use as themes, which is, you know, sex and rock and roll and drugs, which was easy, but suddenly shifting to a national family newspaper, I had no idea what to do. It needed a focus. Opus came along just at the right time and went on to be something else. I'm showing these pictures because it's a bit of a contrast to really where the idea of Opus came from. Besides the need for him, where did I get the idea of a penguin in all of his glory? Got me knocked out of 25 newspapers in the Midwest just that one week. So where did Opus come from? It came from this. This is the fixture of my childhood imagination when I was growing up. It was Mary Poppins, for whatever reason. And I think that I channeled this when it came time to sitting at that lonely cartoon desk in panic, trying to figure out what I should do with this comic strip. I named it Bloom County, by the way, because I didn't know who was going to be in it. Most comic strips are named after the principal character. I had no idea who was going to be in my comic strip. They just gave me a contract. They said, think of something. So I named it after a place, thinking wisely, in my case, that I could figure out who to put in it afterwards, but it's probably going to be in a place called Bloom County. And I actually ended up hating the name of the strip for the rest of my career. It's interesting because Charles Schulz always hated the name Peanuts as well, as he told me one time. And he wanted to name it We Folks, which actually was a worse name, but he didn't know it at the time, and he, to his dying day, he hated the name Peanuts, which was invented by a syndicate, and he was told to name the strip that, since we didn't own our strips in those days. So Garfield was an odd source of, for any idea actually, and it was a good source for one of my odder ideas, which is Bill the Cat. He wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for Garfield. And God bless the dear little cat, he came through to me, for me, and it was just the right time. Now, this gag wouldn't have worked now, it wouldn't have worked 4 years before I did it, but in 1982, it was perfect. And Garfield was just a little bit too visible nearly everywhere, including stuck on the window of every car that if you guys remember that. So Bill went on to other glories. I can assure you that the comic pages of 1983, not that I didn't appreciate this fact, because I really hadn't read the comics growing up, but most editors didn't know what to do with such an image. They were unused to mockery in any way, besides Dewsbury, which they usually stuck on the editorial page. In my case, I was not only mocking public figures, I was mocking other cartoon strips, which was completely forbidden. And when I was putting copyrighted images, such as Charlie Brown speaking in, I think that I probably thought of this because I was told that I couldn't draw Snoopy's head. So I had to hide it. You deal with the issues that you're given.